let's get Eddie Yeranian to weigh in on this. I mean, I got an ambassador that not only hates Trump and derogatory comments he made about him is leaked, but now I find out that he may have leaked U.S. intel that he got to a U.S. media outlet. Oh, my goodness. What is going on here, Eddie Yeranian, live in Cairo?
Yes, John. Well, clearly the British ambassador was plugged in with the previous administration, with people in the previous administration, and doesn't like President Trump. So, I mean, various media outlets have said that he is also tied up with this Fusion One affair. If you followed that, of course, as you no doubt did, that's Britain hacked the election, not Russia hacked the election. So if they're willing to do something like that, everything else is small fry.
Right.
So if we're willing to take this from our main ally, I guess, a Western ally, I guess everything else is, you can expect pretty much anything from your main ally. But I think the one thing that WikiLeaks taught me, and Julian Assange is being made to pay the price for that by the British. They've got him locked up, and I think the pretext of trying to send him to Washington is just that, to keep him locked up under a pretext. And I'm sure the system in the U.S. would try him and punish him as well. But the one thing that I learned, maybe most people weren't following it as we journalists do, but that the Western nations, Britain especially, spy on everything we say and do. And I kind of knew that anyway because I was based in Beirut for 20 years.
Right.
And the main spy station is British. It's located on Cyprus, and I'll tell you how I know that, because I was working with Pierre Salinger, who is the ABC chief correspondent based in London back in 1989, and they gave me a Cypriot telephone because the phone lines in Beirut were dead, at least most of the day. And I told him I heard noises on the phone line, and he said, "Oh, no, that's not possible, because when I built or engineered the system for the Cypriots, we made sure nobody else could listen." And what he meant, he was British, and what he meant was that he was working for British intelligence, and that he's the one who built the phone system in Cyprus. Took me a while to figure that one out and remember these things, but 32 years later, you kind of remember some of them. And in Lebanon, you have at least 5 or 6 countries that listen to the phone lines, and most of everything you say is recorded. Probably our current conversation isn't important enough to trigger any eyes that want to look at it. But it's there in case they need to use it at some point in the future. It's there in case somebody wants to blackmail someone down the line because he's having an affair or something. But anyway, basic point is that somebody's listening to just about everything you say. The French pointed this out to me because it was called Echelon, and it's based outside of London, and they listen to calls there. I guess, they track them in Cyprus, and they track from the Middle East and the rest of the world outside of London. So people are listening to everything, and I'm surprised that this ambassador didn't know that, because his people listen to everything. So obviously somebody else who didn't like what he was saying was listening to him and put his information out on out for the press to see.
Unbelievable what goes on. Well, everybody knows that the UK spies on everything and has all kinds of listening devices, so this doesn't come as a shock to anybody. You're on the John Fredericks Radio Network, Trucking the Truth Across America. We're with Eddie Yeranian. Eddie is live today with us in Cairo, as always. He is a longtime veteran journalist with CBS Radio News, the John Fredericks Radio Network, and with the Voice of America. So, Eddie, I want to move to the Middle East, and a rather fascinating interview yesterday. I've interviewed him, Foreign Minister Mohammed Javad Zarif, said that Iran is not about to develop nuclear weapons, which is a lie because that's what they do. They lie. That's just my narrative. But Iran hitting back in this interview with NBC yesterday, the foreign minister hitting back at President Trump's call for new nuclear negotiations that encompass its ballistic missiles program. He accused Washington of bringing the Middle East to the brink of explosion by selling arms to allies in the Gulf. What did you make of this interview? I thought it was interesting that he would agree to an interview with NBC and then blast Trump and then blame arms sales to the Gulf for the problems.
Yeah, well, I guess when I first heard he was going to New York from Iranian media, I guess over the weekend, I said to myself, "Oh, gee, he's gonna hit all the networks and give interviews to everybody." He's very persuasive. I must confess, I'm not on good terms with him, and I used to have him on LinkedIn, but he zapped me when he became foreign minister. He probably did that with everyone. But anyway, very entertaining, very persuasive, whether he's right or wrong. They base their statements about Iran not wanting to build nuclear weapons on Ayatollah Khamenei, the supreme leader's fatwa, saying Iran judges it, illicit religiously to build nuclear weapons and is not going to do so. But I mean, on the flip side, it's okay for them to lie to foreigners. So it's anyone's guess whether whether they really mean it or not. And I assume they don't. They don't mean it. But he does sound very persuasive. There's a clip that I remember during the negotiations for the JCPOA in 2015, where he says that Iran was bombed by Saddam Hussein, by these Scud missiles that Saddam Hussein was shooting at Iran back in the 80s during the 1980 to 88 Gulf War. And He said nobody in the West wanted to provide us with missiles so we could fire back, which is true. And Saddam Hussein was supported by a lot of Western countries. So I think he was sincere about that. And the Iranians do have a small point in saying that they have a reason for wanting to have missiles, but certainly the range of those missiles is way beyond anything they would really need. And they classify some of their long-range missiles as medium-range missiles. So there is a definite problem there. And you can just imagine, even with their medium-range missiles, if they get into a shooting war with the Israelis and start firing missiles at Tel Aviv. Saddam Hussein tried that, and he actually did get a few hits in there, but it wasn't very accurate. With Scud missiles, of course. The modern stuff is a lot more accurate, but even at that, the Iranians have fired missiles at Israel, and I think the last time they tried, one of them landed in Jordan. I don't know whether they were deliberately aiming for Jordan just so that the Israelis didn't get too upset, or whether they were just inaccurate. And I think they were just inaccurate because they also tried to hit targets inside of, I believe, in Syria after their Revolutionary Guard was attacked by terrorists, by militias supported probably by Saudi Arabia in the western province, the Arab province, Khuzestan province of Iran, I guess in January. So I don't think their missiles are very accurate, but certainly the fact they have that technology is worrisome, and the fact that they can build on them, improve them, and ultimately put a nuclear warhead on them is certainly a bit disconcerting to people in the West who are not too pleased with Iran and its behavior elsewhere.
Well, it's interesting, Eddie Yeranian, that you had a good relationship with the Iranian foreign minister, Mohammad Javad Zarif, because he is very entertaining, obviously, and he is very persuasive. And he's a great speaker. When I heard he was going to New York also, I expected that he would give a round of interviews, not just an exclusive to NBC, but I guess he's got a relationship there. But the time that I interviewed him, the guy is he's actually got a sense of humor, and he knows how to play Western media. When I say play them, I don't mean that in a bad way. He knows how to engage Western media. You can get information out of him, but he does it in a way that he gets his point across without being combative, which is if that makes any sense at all. And when he is combative, it's entertaining because he does it with a smile and he says, laughs at various things. So he's actually extremely effective. But why only the one interview?
I'm seeing that the BBC interviewed him as well on Twitter, although I can't get my hands on that interview. So I think he may have given a couple other interviews after that. But the one we're seeing most recently, or the one that got the most play, was the NBC interview. And I think he was the British, basically, the point he was trying to make with the British, I think, was that they were willing to overlook the British ship, the Iranian ship that was seized in Gibraltar, if the British let it go. And then they were talking about the diplomatic talk was that Britain would allow it to go if they promised it wouldn't go to Syria. And then someone in Tehran said, no, we're not going to promise that. So I think Zarif is effective, but he's got a lot of other people breathing down his back. And if the Ayatollah, the supreme leader, says black, it's black, no matter what Zarif says.
Right. Well, one thing he acknowledged in this interview is that U.S. sanctions have plunged the Iranian economy into really a crisis, Edward, and caused a shortage in critical medicines. They have a shortage of water. And he said that, Zarif said, this has put the Iranian people under a huge humanitarian pressure. And he went on to add, he said, the United States, are terrorizing our people. They are targeting ordinary Iranian citizens through the sanctions. He said that's worse than war. So that was the interview yesterday. We'll see how it plays out. Eddie Yeranian, live, Cairo, our man in the Middle East. We're out of time. Thanks for being with us. John Fredericks Radio Network. More on the communist Gong Squad coming up. Keep it right here.